Welcome to our AITA, where a man found out the hard way that, in many cases, I want to open the marriage is just the premium edition of I already have someone in mind. And now I just need you to cooperate with dignity. And before we get into it, leave your opinion, because some stories begin with speeches about freedom, emotional evolution, and maturity, and end with the mask slipping so hard even the silence feels embarrassed to stay in the room. Today's post came from a guy we'll call Daniel. Daniel was 34, married to Claire, 32, and they have been together for 11 years. Married for 7, according to him. Their marriage had always been the kind other people describe as stable, solid, and almost boring in the best possible way. No chaos, no soap opera nonsense, no cops, no neighbors filming fights, no friend hiding luggage in the trunk. They had a predictable routine, 2 good salaries, a nice apartment, a neurotic dog named Winston, and the kind of intimacy that usually looks invisible from the outside, but quietly holds a lot together underneath. Daniel said he never saw himself as a jealous man. He was not the type to spiral over likes, perfume, or how long someone spends in the shower. Claire went out with friends, traveled for work, had male co-workers, talked to old college acquaintances, and he never turned his own insecurity into a hobby. The problem, according to him, started about 8 months before the post, when Claire switched companies. Nothing dramatic at first, just the usual kind of environment change that turns normal people into renewed people. Claire started coming home using phrases like expansion, deconstruction, new emotional arrangements, and monogamy as an inherited structure. Daniel tried to keep up, but at a certain point it felt like his wife had been possessed by a podcast, hosted by attractive people who never wash a dish and call it freedom. She started slowly. First came the vague conversations about how love should not be possession, then random comments about modern couples, open relationships, radical honesty, desire without guilt. Then came the questions. Do you think a person can love more than one person at the same time? Is fidelity about the body or about transparency? Would you be upset if I admitted I was curious? That kind of question never arrives empty-handed. No, sir. A question like that always walks in carrying an axe behind its back. Daniel answered like someone who still believed this was just a philosophical debate before bed. He said that, for him, marriage was a closed agreement, exclusivity, safety, building a life together. Claire agreed out loud, but in that very specific way that sounds less like agreement and more like a rehearsal for a bigger disagreement later. He said that, looking back now, the problem was not the question itself. It was how calm she was. Claire did not seem curious. She seemed prepared. Everything blew up on a Tuesday, close to midnight, when the two of them were in bed, and Claire, with the same calm people used to order takeout, said she wanted to talk about opening the marriage. Daniel thought she was joking. She was not. She pulled out her phone, opened a notes app, and showed him she had already thought of rules, because apparently, while he was paying the internet bill and remembering to buy dog food, she was drafting the terms and conditions for the funeral of the relationship, according to Daniel. That was the first moment he felt his stomach truly drop, not just because of the proposal itself, though that was already a clean shot to the liver, but because of how planned it was. Claire had bullet points. No close friends. No involving family. No sleeping out without notice. No mixing feelings. No bringing anyone into the marital bed. And, conveniently, one rule saying it would be better for her to start first, because men tend to handle physical involvement with less emotional complication afterward. What a lovely translation. For I already have somebody in mind, and you just have not figured it out yet, Daniel said. He asked, directly, whether there was a specific person. Claire answered, not exactly. That response should have come with sirens. Nobody says not exactly when the truth is clean. Someone with nobody says no. Someone who says not exactly already knows the problem's full legal name. He refused immediately. No speech, no performance. He said he did not want that. He was not willing. And if she needed that, then they wanted different things. And that was when Claire made the move that a lot of Reddit commenters recognized immediately. She stopped selling freedom and started selling guilt. She said he was closed-minded. She said he was reacting out of fear. She said refusing the proposal was the same as controlling her experience as a woman. In less than 10 minutes, Daniel went from shocked husband to emotional jailer in a narrative she seemed to have already rehearsed in the mirror. The detail that made a lot of people raise their eyebrows was this. Claire knew Daniel had an awful history with cheating. His father had abandoned his mother when Daniel was a teenager, after months of trying to push the mistress into the family routine, as if everyone should applaud his modernity. Claire knew all of that. She knew the trauma. She knew how deeply disgusted he was by that whole let's normalize the inevitable conversation. And even so, she chose exactly that ground. Because some people do not want honesty. They want permission with a stamp on it. In the days that followed, the apartment turned into a morgue with Scandinavian decor. Daniel started sleeping in the guest room. Claire alternated between coldness and moral superiority. At one moment she said he needed to grow up. At another she cried and said she was trying to save the relationship before she did something impulsive. Notice the wording. Before she did something impulsive. The bomb was already under the table, and she still wanted applause for warning him she might light the match. Then came the second blow. Claire told 2 of her friends about the conversation, but told it her way. Daniel found out because one of those friends messaged him saying he was being too rigid, and that forbidding his wife from exploring her sexuality was cruel. Forbidding. The man refused to participate in his own humiliation, and suddenly he was a dictator. Fascinating how some people turn boundaries into oppression. When those boundaries interfere with the plan, Daniel ended the post by saying he did not yell, insult, or humiliate his wife. He simply said no. And he asked whether he was the asshole for refusing to consider the proposal. Even though Claire insisted that an open marriage could save their intimacy and bring truth into the relationship, the comments, as expected, were a mix of slaps and diagnoses. Most people said he was not the asshole and that nobody casually proposes an open marriage with a ready-made notes app out of nowhere. Several people said the same thing in different ways. The conversation did not begin when Claire made the proposal. It began when she met someone. Everything after that was just biodegradable packaging for premium cheating. One comment summed it up with brutal precision. She doesn't want an open marriage. She wants an ethical alibi, and honestly, hard to improve on that. Another said, when someone shows up with rules already written, they've already played the whole game in their head 40 times. Exactly. This was not curiosity. It was rollout. It was the beta launch of chaos. Daniel came back 3 days later with an update, and that was when the whole thing stopped looking suspicious and started smelling rotten on an industrial scale. He said that, after making the post, he decided to stop arguing about concepts with someone who was clearly already operating on a completely different floor of dishonesty. Instead, he began watching facts. Claire kept her phone glued to her body. She even took it into the shower. She had changed the password to her laptop. She was suddenly working late in a way she never had before. And, most beautifully of all, she started going to bed with her makeup still on because she was too tired to take it off. Yes, of course, because everyone knows modern female exhaustion manifests as perfect eyeliner and refreshed perfume on an average Wednesday. Daniel also noticed strange charges on the shared card. An expensive dinner at a restaurant where he had never been with her. A ride-share trip to a boutique hotel across the city. A lingerie purchase that conveniently never appeared at home. When confronted, Claire said the dinner was with co-workers, the ride was for a friend, and the lingerie was to feel good about herself. That last explanation almost deserved applause. The only problem is that self-esteem purchase in black lace and hidden from your husband usually has a name, an address, and maybe a beard. The first real crack came when Daniel found a message on Claire's old tablet, which was still synced. It was not a nude. It was not an I love you. It was not anything cinematic. It was worse. It was animated in a routine, everyday kind of way. The kind of conversation that had already moved past sexual tension and into habit. The man in question was Ryan, and Ryan was not some distant co-worker or random ex. Ryan was the husband of Melissa, one of Claire's best friends. That was when the floor really gave out, according to Daniel. The messages did not explicitly say they had already slept together, but they made it more than clear there was a strong emotional affair and hidden meetings. There were inside jokes. There was longing. There were complaints about not being able to show anything in front of others. There was even a message from Ryan saying that if Daniel agreed to open the marriage, everything would be easier. Because look how practical some people are. They do not want to blow up their lives in one sudden blast. They would rather blow them up with project management. Daniel confronted Claire that same night. And Claire, after half an hour of denying the obvious with the defeated energy of someone who knows the evidence is already sitting on the couch, admitted there was something with Ryan and that it had been going on for months. According to her, nothing had happened for real yet. Which, translated from cheater language, means enough had already happened for her to need fresh categories. She swore she wanted to open the marriage precisely so she would not cheat, that she was trying to do the right thing. Imagine the level of moral hallucination there. A person digs a tunnel under the house, plants dynamite in the support beams, and then introduces herself as the responsible engineer because she warned you. Before pressing the button, Daniel asked whether Melissa knew. Claire said no. Ryan was supposedly going to talk to his wife in his own time. Ah yes, his own time, of course. His time, other people's marriages, everyone else's dignity. All very comfortable when the fire is still in someone else's house. Daniel packed a bag that same night and went to his brother's house. He did not tell Melissa right away because, according to him, he was so numb he could barely organize his own breathing. Claire sent dozens of messages, some crying, some accusing, some begging him to calm down so they would not make irreversible decisions in a complex moment. Complex. Some people call it complex. Normal people call it cheating with the PowerPoint. The comments lost their minds over that update. Half the people wanted to know whether Melissa would be told. The other half were already talking about Claire and Ryan like to lab rats who found an outlet and decided to lick it together. One commenter wrote, "Nothing screams ethics like hiding an affair with your friend's husband and then trying to rename it relational evolution. Brutal, deserved." Daniel disappeared for another 4 days. When he came back, he brought the final update. And honestly, it was the kind of ending that sets Reddit on fire. He said that. The day after the last update, Melissa showed up at his brother's house. Not because Claire told her. Not because Ryan told her. Because Melissa had found messages on her husband's smartwatch by herself. And the best worst detail was this. She had already been suspicious for weeks precisely. Because Claire had been acting strangely sentimental whenever she drank during couple hangouts. Those little moments everyone tries to rationalize in real time. Because accepting the truth takes more effort than swallowing discomfort. Daniel showed her everything he had. Melissa showed him everything she had. And together they put together a puzzle that looked like it had been written by people stupid to understand their own trail. This was not recent flirting. It was not confusing closeness. Claire and Ryan had been meeting for at least 5 months. The boutique hotel appeared more than once. There were messages about a work trip where the two of them had spent an entire afternoon together. There was even a conversation about how Daniel would probably reject the open marriage idea at first, but might give in over time if Claire kept using the right language. The right language. What a glorious stage of civilization, where manipulators talk about themselves like strategic romantics. Melissa, according to Daniel, did not scream. She did not break a vase. She did not put on a scene. She just turned pale, sat down, and asked how long her marriage had been used as a floor rack. Sometimes serious pain does not yell. It just changes the room's temperature. Ryan ran straight into his own ruin the moment he realized Melissa knew. First, he tried saying the relationship with Claire was mostly emotional. Then he said his marriage had already been bad. Then he cried. The classic script of a man who thinks he is irresistible right up until he discovers both houses can shut the door on him at the same time. Melissa told him to leave. Daniel filed for divorce. And Claire, cornered, did what people like that almost always do when the progressive performance ends. She became the victim of everything. She told Daniel he was overreacting. She said nothing would have gotten out of control if he had been more open to dialogue. She said exposing Ryan and Melissa was cruel. In other words, she cheated, lied, manipulated, tried to install a spouse-assisted adultery clause inside the marriage, and still wanted VIP treatment because the scandal had finally found the correct address. But then came the last shovel of dirt. Daniel said that during the early divorce process, he discovered something else. Claire had been transferring small amounts from their joint account into a separate account for months. Not huge amounts. Nothing flashy. Just enough not to trigger immediate alarm. Added together, it was enough money to furnish a modest apartment or, more realistically, finance her exit if the plan exploded. So, beyond the secret romance, Madam had also been preparing an escape route. The open marriage was not a proposal. It was a makeshift bridge to a new life where Daniel would pay for the crossing and still come out looking like the backward husband who could not keep up with evolution. And the final strike, the most venomous detail of all, came from Melissa's mother-in-law, who decided to open her mouth after the mud was already spread all over the sidewalk. Claire had been pregnant the month before and suffered a very early miscarriage. Daniel said he never even knew she had been pregnant. Melissa did not know either. Ryan did. So, suddenly Claire's urgency to open the marriage stopped looking like desire, curiosity, or even a badly hidden affair. It started looking like a desperate attempt to scramble the timeline. Because when everyone is officially free, certain questions become much easier to avoid. Daniel made it clear he will never know whether that pregnancy was his or Ryan's, and honestly, he did not even want to know. There are questions that, once asked, only serve to dig the bottom of the pit another meters deeper. In the end, Claire lost her husband, lost her friend, lost her lover, became venomous gossip in the whole group, and still tried, by text, to say that Daniel had destroyed any chance at a mature resolution. Coming from the woman who tried to turn cheating into a relationship workshop topic, it almost qualifies as modern art, ugly, expensive, and pointless. Daniel closed the final update by saying he was exhausted, sad, and strangely relieved. He said the most disturbing part was not discovering the affair. It was realizing that Claire looked him in the eye every single day while building, brick by brick, the lie she later wanted to call honesty. And he ended by saying that maybe a marriage does not end at the moment of betrayal. Maybe it ends the instant one spouse decides the other is stupid enough to swallow any pretty explanation, as long as it arrives wrapped in modern language. And honestly, hard to argue with that. So no, he was not the asshole for refusing his wife's proposal. He was just the last man in the room to realize the proposal was never about freedom. It was about legal cover for emotional filth. In this case, open marriage was just the elegant label Claire found for trying to walk out the front door. After spending months crawling through the window, now I want to know your opinion. The second she showed up with pre-written rules on her phone, was it already over right there? Or was there still some chance to save it? And tell me this too, because this one is vicious. Could you forgive the cheating? Or would the manipulation disguised as maturity be the thing that destroyed everything for good?